Good morning, whoever is here.
Morning, Rob.
Yeah, hi, Ewan.
Morning, Rob.
Hi, Maxine. Cold,
How are you all?
bitter morning, isn't it? Cold, bitter morning.
It was a little chilly. I've managed to get my exercise in already, though.
Oh, good man, good man.
Your usual circuit around the lake, Ewan?
Yes, yes, very early this morning with a mask on.
Oh, well done. We've had a little bit of extra time this morning.
Yeah, we were going to swear in the new councillor. That was the reason for the later start. But obviously that didn't happen because of the lockdown. So I guess, Becca, we couldn't change the start time, could we? Given that it had gone out as advertised for 10:30.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just easier to keep it at 10:30. Yeah. It might be something we continue with, Rob, for Finance Committee.
Well, you never know. I'd prefer an early start, but you managed to do other things, though. There are lots of other things to do, so. We'll have to get back to the habit of having these meetings, meetings via Zoom again. It looks like we're in for a bit of a long haul here, aren't we?
It certainly does. I think it's much easier this time, though. I think it's just kind of like riding a bike, really, isn't it?
It is,
just
yeah.
Getting back into the swing of it.
Yeah.
Just a note, councillors, that we are live streaming at the moment.
Thanks, Becca. Good to know.
Morning.
Morning
Hi,
all.
Ryan.
Hey, Rob. Rob, apologies, my video's not working. I'm just going to have to reboot my computer. I'll be back in a second.
Okay, yep, see you soon.
Yes.
Hi, Martin. We're just waiting for Mark to come back on, then we'll have a quorum, I think, Becca, is that? Oh, we've got Sarah now. We've got Dave coming on, Angela coming on.
Needless to say, your keenness to start meetings at 7 in the morning, I can't quite endorse, Councillor Pascoe.
Where was the 7 o'clock this
Oh,
morning?
when you said you want an early start, I thought you wanted us
No,
to
no,
get
no,
up in the
no,
morning.
I was talking about 9:30.
Oh, okay.
Rather than the 10:30 time.
No, forgive my humour, but I was just getting a bit wary of your keenness for an early start.
We have call it a breakfast meeting then. Okay, everybody. Well, we've got a quorum. It's 10:32. So, Marina, welcome to right. Got it. Welcome to the August Finance Committee meeting, and back to the old routine of this being fully on Zoom. So I'll do my best this morning and this afternoon to make sure I get your hands up in order. But if I don't, forgive me, I probably will see most of them once they're already up and not necessarily in the order. So let's get underway. Apologies. And I've received partial apologies from Councillor Kesh, who's likely to be in and out today. Do I have any other apologies?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan. No further discussion. Those in favour, please say aye. Or we don't have we don't have a decision on that. Confirmation of the agenda. I'll confirm the agenda in the order that the run sheet has been distributed to you this morning.
I'll second.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Public forum, and good morning to Bruce Clarkson, who I did see here earlier on. I've lost him now. Bruce, good morning, Bruce. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting, and you're going to speak this morning to us on the Zoo Whakareki entry precinct, stage 1B on the project funding options. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So, well, thank you, Rob, Chair Rob, and elected members. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. I hope you can hear me clearly.
We can.
That's great. So, obviously, I am speaking to item 11, the Zoo Whakareki entry precinct stage 1B. And the funding options. And I'm speaking as the chair of Whakareki Advisory Group for the Natural Heritage Park. That's the partners that have been involved since the inception of the Natural Heritage Park in 2004. I wanted to commend the staff for the report that they've produced on this issue in setting out the background and options so thoroughly and clearly. And while it is disappointing that the external funding target has not been met, I wanted to strongly endorse the efforts that the staff have made in relation to this issue and confirm from my own background and experience as someone who's dependent on contestable funding that things are not getting any easier. They are difficult, and it's highly competitive to achieve targets like the one that was set in this particular case. The advisory group really appreciates the way that the staff have kept us in the loop throughout the process, and we've provided assistance where possible in making funding applications, and of course we'll continue to do that. That in no way means that the efforts cannot continue just because we haven't currently met the target, and we wanted to offer our continuing support in this regard. I'm very optimistic that as the understanding of Whakareki spreads more widely, that more funding will eventuate. I think one of the issues is that we just need to continue to communicate the success of this project because it is innovative and novel and to some extent ahead of its time. And I think we still need to get that message out there. So moving on to the core issue though, I did want to note that of course that the public expectations have been raised by the original plan and the timetable that was put forward. And it would be extremely disappointing if we didn't proceed now. So it won't come as any surprise to you, Rob, or the members of the committee, I'm sure, that we fully support the staff recommendation for option 3 to complete the project as intended. And we respectfully request that your support becomes available as well, because we actually believe that this is the best option. And we note in particular that the revenue target will be moved to another zoo project in later years, and therefore ensure that the capital revenue targets are met across the 10-year period. So in conclusion, I just wanted to, and noting again that we're back in lockdown, I just wanted to make a few comments and submit that this project is one for the times. This is the point about it. Backyard biodiversity will be favoured over all sites away from where we live for the foreseeable future because of the scenario we're in currently. And this community hub that is being funded in this option will promote locally and regionally focused economic activity. You know, we are going to be constrained for some time, but this is the place where this should happen locally and regionally, and will assist health and well-being of our community and provide that continuing social cohesion. Because this is a critical local visitor destination for the world that we live in now, the COVID world. So thank you for your attention, Rob and councillors and staff. And I am happy to answer any questions if you have them, but you gather that we strongly support option 3. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce, and thanks for coming on this morning to present to us. I'll just ask governance, do we have any other presenters in the public forum?
No, just
No.
Bruce.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bruce. You're welcome, of course, to stay on board if you wish, or perhaps rejoin us a little later in the morning when we get to item 11.
Yeah, I'll have to go to live stream, I understand. Thank you for that offer, Rob, and I probably will zoom in again on the live stream. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Bruce.
Right, bye.
Bye. Okay, everybody. Now, just perhaps go back to the agenda. What I'd like to do today is suggest that we have a 15-minute break around 11:30 to 11:45, and then a lunch break at 1 o'clock. But I'll be guided by members of the committee in terms of what progress we are making at that point through the agenda as to whether we continue and conclude the meeting without a lunch break. All right, so let's move on now to confirmation of item 5, which is confirmation of the Finance Committee open minutes from the 15th of June. Are there any comments on the accuracy of those minutes?
Happy to
If
move,
not,
Rob.
I'll move. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say I'll move or second, whatever
Oh,
you
thank
like.
you. Yep, that'd be great. Thanks, Mark. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Thanks, Maxine. Just a point on the three staff action points. The capital deferrals, I believe Ian is reporting in his report. Tracy's report has the graphs. And can somebody just update me on the residential section supply, which was an action point in the non-financial services report? Had that been emailed to us?
Yes, I think Greg Carsten sent that out either
he did, that's right.
during last week.
Yep. Okay, thank you for that. All right, so those in favour that the minutes are an accurate record, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Away, hands up. Yep. Those against? Carried. All right, let's move on now to the chair's report. And perhaps before I table that, I just want to give you a little bit of a background to the writing of this report so that you can read it or have read it in the context of when it was written. I wrote it before the agenda of the council meeting of the 12th of August had been released. I tweaked the report when the agenda was received. but then I had to submit the report before the council meeting. So, so no subsequent changes were made following that discussion at the August 12th meeting. I'd prefer, if we have got questions on the chair's report, that we focus on the financial aspects of Three Waters, and what I've endeavoured to cover in my report are some of the financial aspects and facts of the reform as is currently known. So I will move the report be received, but before that, I'll call for any questions. No questions? All right.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I do if I could. Thank you.
Yes. Perhaps if you could just raise your hand so I can.
Yeah,
see
look,
on
I'll
clear.
let the Deputy Mayor go and I'll rediscover where the raise my hand thingy is.
Okay, it's down under reactions.
Ah, perfect.
Okay, yes, Deputy Mayor Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Rob, and thanks for the great report. You cover a bit of stuff other than just financial stuff in your report, such as the governance structure. So I'm hoping that we can well, maybe won't ask questions about that, but your report is quite wide ranging. So I'll let you guide me on my questions there, what I can ask. I just wanted to ask, you talk about right at the end about our next step in terms of providing feedback to the government, and that I guess what I'm wanting to ask you or staff is, do we have any certainty that if we do that, the government is actually going to give an opportunity for our public to actually have a say on this? They say that they're going to make a decision after we've given feedback. But do we have any guarantee that there will actually be a chance for us to then consult freely and openly with our community?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jeff. I see Stephen is on. I can't see whether Stephen, I can't. Perhaps Stephen, if you'd like to make any comment in response to Jeff's question.
Good morning, Rob. Good morning, councillors. Yes, I'm here to answer any questions on this today. The program we've been given states that we've got this 8-week period to give feedback, and then states the government will advise us the next steps from there. We don't have an updated timetable, which from what was provided to us some months ago, and that timetable didn't take account of where we are today. So there is no information from the government as to what happens after we've provided our feedback.
All right, so it's possible that the public may, if there's legislation to a select committee or something, it's possible that our public will never actually get the chance to have a wide-ranging consultation process with us.
It's hard to answer that question.
Well, okay, I guess that's the answer. It is possible.
Treat that as a statement, I think.
Well, no, it's a question. Can you guarantee me that that the public is going to get a chance?
No, there's no provision in the process.
Right.
As been provided.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Councillor Ewan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Rob. Look, my questions are on a similar line, but I could either yourself as the author of the report or staff expand on the ownership structure of the new entity and the governance of the new entity in regards to mana whenua. Is there a suggestion that any of the ownership falls to mana whenua in any way? Could you walk me through that aspect? That's my first question.
If I can just perhaps offer the reading I've done, it suggests that that's one of the confusing areas. On one hand, the government talks about the assets remaining as community assets, but they're still working on where those assets will be recorded, and of course how the original ownership of those assets will be recorded, if at all, in the new entity. But Stephen may have a more up-to-date view on where government or where DIA are going in respect to that. But I've heard the words used that they will remain community assets. But then elsewhere I've heard, and that was at Zone 2, I heard elsewhere that the assets would be transferred, net assets would be transferred out of the council's books and would end up being an asset in the new entity. So I'm not sure how ownership would be then described, how community ownership would then be described in the council's books or in the entity's books. But Stephen, you may have a different view or a more up-to-date view on that.
So the view I take, thank you, Chairman. The view I take is from my reading of the the reading of the cabinet minutes, and in the space of governance, the cabinet minutes are quite good in that regard. The assets will be transferred to the entity. Council will be the owner of the entity, and the assets will be held by the entity on behalf of the community, the same as they're held by council on behalf of the community at the moment. That's the ownership as it's laid out in the cabinet minute.
Stephen, sorry, could you repeat that, mate?
Can I finish with the mana whenua part of that?
Yep.
The mana whenua part of it is that the regional representative group is 50%, 6 members from local government and 6 members appointed by mana whenua. The drafting of the cabinet minutes is clear that mana whenua are not the owners of the asset or the entity. So I'll finish there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could, my second question relates to the briefing document from the government, which is attached to your report, which I found helpful. My question is, and I just want confirmation, not only are we being asked to surrender these assets, and I had understood from your report, we're not then getting shares in the new entity, but from what I've just heard, government's aspiration is still that council owns the assets. So I find that somewhat confusing. But I am mindful in the document that they've issued that they go on to say engagement with iwi and Maori, that they are expecting the local authority, if we choose to take the funding allocation, that we need to engage with Maori and discuss how we are to use that funding with Maori. So am I correct in saying there's still some questions about how our ownership of the asset is physically reflected? I'm clear now that 50% of the new governance board of the new entity will be mana whenua. And am I clear that whatever funds come our way, we have to enter into dialogue with iwi to determine how we spend that funds?
Are you talking about the $58 million?
Correct. Well, I'm referring to page 17 of the attachment after your report. It's issued by where in the subheading it says engagement with iwi/Maori.
Hang on, what page number is that?
So it's, I guess it's item 6, attachment 2, page 17 of 117.
Page 7, okay.
And it's the final 2 sentences of the first paragraph, where it says that iwi Māori will play a role in the new delivery system as partners. Locals authorities will be expected to engage with iwi Māori in determining how it will use its funding allocation. So I read that as not only is mana whenua taking over 50% of the governance, we've yet to have clarity about actually how this new asset is owned and how our ownership is reflected. But I'm also asking, are we now having to have a dialogue with iwi and ask their advice of how we spend the $50-odd million?
Okay, well, Stephen, just correct me on this. My understanding is that iwi representation is on the panel that selects the governance, the board, rather than 50% of iwi being directors of the entity.
It's not what it says.
Is that correct, Stephen? If you go back
there's
to
a
that.
regional there's a regional governance group that is 50% local government, 50% mana whenua. Their primary role is to create a strategic statement that is passed on to the board, and secondly, to appoint the people that will appoint the board. So there's no process where mana whenua appoint the board directly, and all decisions of the regional reference group are by 75% majority.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I don't know if I've got a full answer to my last question, which is in reference to
the 58
page 17.
million.
The last 2 sentences. And I would, if I may, just want to have clarity from Stephen's answer just then. Stephen, are you saying to me, to the meeting, that the selection panel will be made up of 50% mana whenua, but that does not necessarily mean that the governance board has to be made up of 50% mana whenua, although one assumes if they've got the ability to appoint 50% of the board of directors, they're inclined to choose from a pool of mana whenua.
So I don't think that's correct representation. There is a regional governance board that appoint a panel that appoints the board. The regional governance board is made up of 12 members, 6 of them being mana whenua and 6 of them being local government.
So you're saying, Stephen, that
members appoint a panel,
mm-hmm.
and they appoint a panel by 75% majority. So both groups need to essentially agree for that panel to be appointed. That panel was a professional panel. So you'd expect people that are in the business of appointing directors to be involved in that. And they need to create a skills matrix for the skills and attributes they expect of the directors that are appointed to the board.
Okay. Any chance I could get an answer, Chair Rob, to my last question, the one regarding, have I read the briefing document correctly, where it's asking if we accept the 58 odd $million, that we need to engage with Maori and iwi in determining how we use its funding allocation.
Yeah, I think that's quite clear, Councillor Ewan, and that's something that I wasn't specifically aware of until you've raised that this morning. And certainly in the forums that I've been involved in thus far, that has not been a point of discussion.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. None of the forums I've been part of have discussed it yet.
But I'm saying that I have not been involved in every forum because there are lots of other meetings going on, between mayors and between the mayoral forums and so forth. So that's a new point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But one can assume we could probably have reliance on interpreting the government's will by reading the document. And the document, in my opinion, makes it very clear the intent. And I repeat, local authorities will be expected to engage with the iwi Māori in determining how it will use its funding allocation.
Very clear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Just a point of order, Chair. The document that Councillor Ewan is referring to is the local government, the old Solgan group. I'm just trying to think of their new name, rather than it being the a government document.
Well, no, I'd perhaps
No, it's not. It's
Maxim.
Internal Affairs.
If you go back to page 14, you'll see it's come from Internal Affairs, it's come from Taitara and from local government. So to me, it seems like a joint document.
I'll happily accept her apology, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right, let's move on to Councillor Mark.
Thank you. Every time we talk about this, we discover we know less. Yeah, can I just dig into the, Stephen, while you're there, just be really clear for me. So at current, we own the assets, we make the decisions, we decide which pipes are going in the ground, and we decide how we're best going to control our water. So we're moving to an entity, let me see if I'm right, where we will become a part of we will still own the entity, technically, and our input will be, we will be one of 22 councils who could get on a 12-person board, 6 of which will be councils, that will appoint the committee that appoints the board. Is that right?
Yes.
And is that quite a far step from the amount of control we have now over the water, in your mind? Like, this is major, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're in a phase where we're looking to provide feedback on that.
Yeah, okay. Look, I noticed the Christchurch City Council and their mayoral forum of surrounding mayors have actually just sort of said, look, tai hoa, let's slow down so we can talk with our community. Will we be following that excellent leadership, or are we just going to carry on? Because it seems to me the more we discuss it, the less we know. And our job is to involve our community in this. So is there a possibility that we could follow that lead and say, let's not disagree with it, just slow down a little bit?
That's a hard question for Stephen to answer, given that it probably is our decision rather than his.
Okay. Do you want to have a go then, Rob?
Pardon?
Do you want to have a go at answering it?
Well, I mean, I've read the same article that was in the paper yesterday. Was it yesterday? Or last couple of days, and you know that may well be an exercise that the local mayoral forum in the Waikato may want to follow up on.
I guess I was asking Stephen because he's been sort of talking with those in the know, and there must have been that sort of murmuring from some people. I'm just trying to wonder what the reaction that you get from there is when you bring that sort of stuff up.
So the discussions I'm having is all about influencing through this next eight-week period. There is discussion about the possibility that this may be made mandatory. It's one of the options that happens in October. So this process we're in now is our best opportunity to influence it. And so whatever other decision we make, it'll be our advice that we still continue on trying to influence this as much as we can to get outcomes that are appropriate for our community. So that's where my advice sits, as Rob said, forming a view on whether we should be asking the government to slow down or not is not something that my team have given thought to. We read the article like yourselves last night.
Yeah, okay. All right. Look, I'll leave it at that at the moment, Rob. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Mark. Any further questions? All right, well, I've moved that my chair's report be received. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan. We now go into debate. I don't have anything further to say, but I reserve the right to respond. But does anyone wish to debate this? And I have Councillor Ewan first.
Thanks, Chair Rob. Look, I really appreciate the report. I think I really appreciate how you're continuing to keep this issue in front of us. I acknowledge that this issue is evolving. My position currently is I am totally convinced that we need some reform. The elephant in the room is there are a number of councils in New Zealand over a number of years who have underfunded significant assets when it comes to Three Waters. Hamilton City Council is not one. My concern with the current proposal is there is still too many questions unanswered, and I am frightened by some glaring gaps in the information, and I'm afraid that our assets could be spun off to a yet totally determined entity, and how that is governed, how the ownership is reflected, is concerning to me. So I would and I will continue to advocate for us as a council to advise government to slow this down, that in fact they should complete the review of local government first, and it would make more sense that the Three Waters spin out of that. And I would imagine the government has enough to focus on trying to get this country fully vaccinated than trying to dabble in areas of local government in this current environment.
Thanks, Councillor Ewan. Deputy Mayor Jeff.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for the great report. I think it shows for me again just how rushed all of this is. And I think I agree with Councillor Wilson. I actually think we should be going a step further than what you suggest in your report. I think we should be taking the Canterbury Mayoral Forum's lead and calling on the government to halt the reforms entirely for a decent period, a year, so we can talk properly with our community. 8 weeks is a joke. It's not good enough to just offer them a link on our website and hope that they get involved. That's not a discussion with our community. And we've heard today that there's no guarantee that if the public don't get a say now, they ever will. Stephen said our best opportunity is now to influence it. After that, all bets are off. So we will be at the government's whim then. So where is the public's view on all this? We should be taking the responsibility of leading this consultation and bugger the legal opinions that say we don't have to consult yet. Morally, it's the right thing to do. There's now enough information about the disturbing governance structure for this new entity that we should be asking residents what they think. We should be telling them what they need to know, not keeping them in the dark. We're being asked to hand over 1.6 billion in water and sewerage and stormwater assets to an entity we will have very little influence over, quite possibly. We'll be like Pluto at arm's length. And at the end of the day, residents, Hamilton residents who've paid for these assets are going to be dependent on a board somewhere. We may lose control of our water and be subject to outside agendas, just what a growing city doesn't need. A few years ago, there was a whole lot of concern about this council setting up a water CCO. That led to the 2016 No Water Meters election campaign. Well, here's the same plan on steroids, folks, because this time it's a massive entity representing 22 councils. Hello, water meters. I think the truth is our residents know very little about these reforms. We've got a responsibility to get the government to stop this process and bring the residents along with us. We are responsible for the welfare of the citizens of Hamilton. We're letting the government decide what's best for our city instead of standing up for our own residents. So recently, we as a council altered our stance on Three Waters to make it more neutral. I want to see us go a step further and say to the government, let's stop this process for a decent year, and I'll be happy to bring such a resolution to an upcoming meeting. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Mark.
Thank you. It's always hard after going after Ewan and Jeff because they both express themselves so eloquently. But look, I go back to my original point as I did with the contentious Māori seat issue. Trust the public. I feel like we're acting like we're afraid of their opinions, and there's nothing to be afraid of. I haven't talked to anybody who doesn't want better water, who doesn't want better environmental conditions. And when the Māori principles are explained to them, people like them. But we just seem to be hiding behind the speed. We just seem to be hiding behind the speed. And I've got to say, the more I listen, the less I get it. And it worries me when I hear Stephen, who's closest to this, telling me he doesn't know. And there's no disrespect to Stephen or anything to that effect. It's just that this is going at such breakneck speed. This is our one of our biggest spends, and our community needs to have a far stronger say. And I take up Deputy Mayor Jeff's point about the water meters. Say they do want to put in water meters. What are we going to do? How are we going to stop that? Good luck. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mark. Are there any other speakers in debate? All right, if I just wrap up on a right of reply. Look, I agree with the earlier three speakers. I think that reform is needed, and I suspect that looking around the whole of our council table, everyone would agree to that. But there are some serious gaps in how this reform will be achieved. I understand that the government initially looked at 23 different models of water reform, and they selected one which was based on the Scottish model. We haven't seen the other 22, so we don't know whether, and I don't think I want to see the other 22, but there may well have been some models worthy of a look at to see whether they would achieve the outcomes that we and our community would think as being desirable. I agree that the pace of change, and I've got that covered in my report, is very, very fast, and we're picking up information and answers to questions as we go along, which means that if we haven't asked the questions now, they won't be answered until the new structure is in place, and we may find ourselves with some significant problems. I think there's a tendency, and there has been in the ads that we've seen on television, there's been a tendency to suggest that we haven't managed water particularly well, and that the government's going to come in and save us all because they are going to deliver it well. And of course, there's no guarantee that that will happen either. What I would like to see is clearly what has been articulated in the press over the last few days. There are some serious concerns about the speed and the haste at which we're rolling out this reform, and maybe a pause to allow the local government reform to supersede this water reform so that the two can be balanced and put into place and give us outcomes not only for water, but also for local government. So that's the end of the debate. Let's go to the hands on the reactions key, and those in favour of receiving the report. And those against, use the cross. Has everyone voted? Sarah?
Dave, you're not receiving the report, is that right?
About receiving the report. Okay. Becca, have you got the numbers there? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think we're just missing one voter. Just asking my team, can they tell who that is?
Martin's dropped off.
No,
He's there.
He's there. So 1, 2, 3.
You'll see that
5,
Jeff
6, 7, 8.
hasn't got a response.
Jeff, you haven't got a response.
I've taken it off now. I had it up for quite a while.
Sorry.
Why don't you just use a show of hands, and I respect the council?
Yeah, okay.
We've
well,
got it.
The report.
Yeah, thanks, Martin.
We've got it down, Councillor Rob. So the motion is carried, 9 for, 1 against.
Sorry, Becca, I took it off too soon.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on now to item 7, which is the Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report. And I did see Ian here at once. Yes, there you are, Ian. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Rob. Good morning, councillors. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep, and we can see the top of your head.
Sorry. Okay.
Tilt your screen forward. That's better.
Is that better?
That's better.
Excellent. Sorry. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. I'm working off a laptop, so I've got the report on my screen, so I can only see a little snippet on the top of my screen. But anyway, hey, listen, guys, in keeping with the tone of the Zoom meeting, we're going to do something a little bit different this morning with the Capital Monitoring Report. You'll note from the reading it that we're going to break it into 2 parts. We're going to give you a looking back summary that Chris Barton is going to lead, which is just looking back over the previous 3 years. And there is a video attached with that presentation. And once Chris has finished doing that, then I'll take you through the more standard traditional capital monitoring report. So if everyone's comfortable with that process, I'll hand over to Chris Barton and I'll let Chris take us through the looking back document.
Thanks, Ian. Good morning, elected members. So as Ian outlined, we wanted to take the opportunity in this report to reflect on the capital portfolio delivery over the past 3 years and just outline some of the key achievements in this period. So in setting the previous 2018 to 28 10-year plan, elected members set a bold plan to look after our existing assets and invest in a large program of capital works across the city. Largely, we have delivered in accordance with this plan, with a number of projects and programs of work completed and well underway. So overall, across the 3-year period, we delivered $590 million of works to maintain and improve the city. And that's compared with $255 million spend over the corresponding 2015 to 2018 3-year period. So a summary of some of the key projects is included in attachment 1 to this report, which is page 35 of the agenda on Diligent. And we've also created a video, which Ian mentioned, which we can show you now. So governance team, can you roll the video?
Smooth.
Mark, could you hum a tune while this is playing?
I take it, Chris, there's supposed to be some sound.
Yeah, sorry, there's meant to be some audio attached. So as we're saying, we're trying to be a bit experimental in this different environment. So we'll send out the link to the video separate to the meeting, so that you've got visibility. And I think following today or later on in the week or at an appropriate time, we're planning to share this through some of our council social media channels, etc. as well, to provide some visibility to the community. So that's in terms of the looking back document, which is attached as attachment 1. I'll suggest I'll leave you to work through that in your own time, but I'll pass you back to Ian, but happy to take any questions at once Ian's presented the other component of the report.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. So moving on to the more traditional capital monitoring report. So what I will start by saying is that what we're presenting this morning is the 12-month draft results. I use the word draft deliberately because, as we know, the annual report is currently subject to Audit New Zealand. Auditor in the building, not physically actually today, are they? But they're on site and completing that audit. So the results are drafted for such time as they complete that audit, and we will report back to you on when that comes out. So what I would like to say, and I just want to reiterate what Chris said in his presentation, is that, if we look back over the previous 3 years, the investment in assets across the city at 590, that's a huge 130% increase over the previous 3 years from the old LTP, and it just talks to all the discussion that we've had in the chamber and you've had through various meetings over the last 3 years about just the sheer size of the growth that's happening in the city. So that is quite a significant increase. In terms of the 2021 financial year, which is we're talking about today, the final spend for that year was 245 million, 245.3 million. And what was interesting about that is that was the final position. That was a little bit higher than we had been forecasting to you throughout the year. We believe we were going to come in about 10 million below that. The result of that actual spend at 245 is that our deferrals that we're going to report today for the 2021 financial year are now 55.3 million. So that is 10 million less than the 65 we had been reporting to you previously. So I think that's a good news story. I did, at this stage, I want to just be clear, and Councillor Rob and Chairman Rob mentioned it earlier about reporting to you on the deferrals. If you go to paragraph 35 in the report, you'll see that we say that while there are deferrals coming out of the current year, the 2021 year with this 55.3, the actual deferrals that we're moving out, we've moved out into the new LTP period, total 70.5. Now, the reason you're getting a difference there of 15 million is that's referring to deferrals that have come from a prior financial year, one before the 2021 year. We've had a look at that balance. We're always looking at deliverability of the program and how those deferrals impact on the current LTP and annual plans. At the moment, of that 70 million, we have indicated 50.5 million of that will move into the current financial year, i.e. that's the year we're now in, 21-22. The balance of 20 million will go into year 2 of the new LTP of 22-23. What I did want to say there too is, and it's come up a number of times throughout this committee meeting through the last 12 months in particular, is that giving you a little bit, you the elected members, a little bit more visibility and clarity around what's happening with those deferrals in terms of the periods or the future years they're moving into. And so going forward into the new financial year, I'm going to change the disclosures a little bit in this report to give you far greater clarity on if we're telling you we're moving money out or bringing money in, that you know exactly the periods or the years in which it's moving out to or it's coming in from, and give you a better indication of what that does in terms of the overall deliverability of the program and the impact on the financial strategy. I'll move on to savings. Final savings for the year were 9.4 million. That was slightly less than what was indicated in the original savings report Council approved as part of the 1828 LTP. We were indicating at about 14.2 million. Having said that, though, the 9.4 million is a genuine saving, and the impact on that has been estimated to be around 300,000 favourable impact on the operating statement through reduced depreciation charges and reduced interest charges. If I move on to work in progress, WIP, as we commonly refer to it, at the end of the financial year, 30th of the 6th, we had a balance of 443. I've talked a number of times about that as a high number, but as a high number is to be expected when you look at the size of our capital program. Having said that, when we analyse the 443.7, we know we've got 60.5 million, which is capital expenditure that should have been capitalised, but we've been unable to capitalise it for a number of reasons. So where we are at the moment is our finance team have assessed the depreciation impact of that value, and they have lodged that or journaled that through the operating statement, so it is reflected in your year-end balance. So you have got confidence that we're not understating our financial position. Clearly, we would have liked that number to be considerably lower at 30th of June than it was. And so what we have done as a result of that is we have stood up a new team, an internal team that's going to be led by our internal auditor, Whakareki, working in assistance with the Asset Centre of Excellence Office, Paul Gower's team, to overview and overhaul the entire WIP capitalisation process so that we're in a far better position. We can be far more agile and move with speed in terms of getting this capital expenditure capitalised at the right time, so we don't have these lags coming through. In terms of projects that we are reporting with risk, there's now 4 projects. That's a drop from previous reports. We had 5. I cover in paragraphs 45 through 48. There's a brief summary of each of the projects and what the risk is. None of those 4 projects are new, though, and that's just a continuation of what you've seen in previous reports. Lastly, I'd just like to cover, we have concluded the report with making you aware of 2 what we consider portfolio risks. The first one is cost escalation. Now, what we're seeing anecdotally and through some of the contract prices now coming through is there are going to be, we are seeing an upward pressure in our contract material costs, both in the raw material and in the cost of delivery. We're also seeing upward pressure in terms of resourcing and the cost of labour as well. So we know these are going to cause future problems on our budget in terms of deliverability to keep within approved budgets and within financial strategy metrics. At the moment, though, the information is something we are aware of. We've stood up a team, Tracy Musty in finance is leading that, to look at the overall impact of what those cost escalations may look like in terms of budgetary pressures and budgetary impacts, because clearly it doesn't just talk to the capital program, it will talk to the entire organisational budgets and then have flow-through effect into financial strategy metrics, which we need to keep our hand on. So that work is underway, and my expectation is that our report will come back to this committee as soon as we have that data. And Chris Barton, who's obviously here today, he can speak more to that if our councillors have any questions. The second portfolio risk we mentioned is to do with the confirmation of the Waka Kotahi NZTA funding. The issue here is around the amount that HCC has assumed we will receive as part of our LTP. We're not expecting NZTA to approve their funding package envelope until early September, but all indications that we're getting through is that they are working in a very confined budget space, and we are likely to see a number of the budgets we were expecting, or a number of the revenue streams we're expecting to receive, not to come through. Again, this will speak to the deliverability of the program and impact on financial strategy, debt to revenue, etc. So again, what we're doing now is waiting for confirmation from NZTA, and once we have a degree of certainty, we will come back to this committee again with the outcome there and present the options on the table in terms of how we deal with that. The report itself covers some of the main projects that will be affected by that, and the one that jumps off the page at me is obviously the Borman Road extension, which has got a significant NZTA subsidy assumption attached with it. The last thing is, I'm going to conclude with just a last note. It's not covered in the report, but clearly we are in lockdown 4 at the moment. And that's only come to realisations since this report was done. General Manager Chris Allen sent an email out to elected members last week, I believe on Friday, just making you aware that there should be an expectation that there will be some financial claims by contractors against HCC in terms of the current contract documentation. Much like we did with the first lockdown. Again, once we have certainty and we can quantify the volume and the individual claims, we'll come back to this committee with that detail. But again, I know Chris is on the line today again, and he's more than comfortable to take any direct questions on that. So on that note, I will conclude my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. And as I said, we've got Chris Barton here and we've got Chris Allen as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Ian. I'll now defer to questions, and Councillor Ryan.
Thanks, Chair, and happy to move the report when you're ready too. Thanks, Ian. A few questions. First one is just a Ruakura Road update, paragraph 48. What's the timing? Obviously, stage 4, lockdown 4 hasn't helped, but roughly what time are we looking to open that back up?
Okay, I'll ask Chris. I'll ask Chris to take that question, please. Chris Barton.
Yeah. So obviously lockdowns impacting on that. Is your question primarily around the current temporary traffic management and road closures, or in terms of completion of the project?
I guess just traffic management to know when flow through will occur again.
Yep. So we've currently got that. It was closed for approximately 2 weeks for the first stage. We did say it was probably about a 3-month period that road would be closed in different stages overall. So we've still got a couple of months at least of works to go on that section, but it is going to be in 3 different stages. So at the moment we've closed the first section at the Watertight Drive end, and then we'll be moving further along towards Knighton Road. In different sections. So there's about 2.5 months still of closures to come through there once we get out of lockdown.
Okay, thank you. Probably back to Ian. In the attachment 1, all the external funding references, just 2 questions on that. We've got the expenditure and then the external funding. Is the external funding included in that expenditure, or is that separate?
That's the external funding is separate. So we tend to talk about gross expenditure, and then we receive external funding that contributes and helps offset the cost of that, with generally the balance being met by HCC funding sources, i.e. loans.
Just to be clear on that, I think the expenditure is inclusive of the external funding, so that's the gross expenditure.
Okay. Sorry, I'll just go back to my notes. I guess the other thing which potentially would be helpful just on that external funding, I assume a lot of that is Whakareki type setups, but whether you could put a line or 2 in there just to outline where that external funding comes from or what it is.
Yeah, I don't have that in front of me, Councillor Ryan, but we can certainly do that. You may note with our annual report and LTP presentations that capital expenditure is usually broken down between NZTA, Whakareki funding, and other capital contributions, just to give the reader a little bit of feel for the weighting that we get from the NZTA. But we can certainly do that for you.
I just, for example, Rotorua 7.5 external funding, Ruakura 6.3 external funding, Northwest 1.3. I guess just knowing, is that basically just Whakareki, or is it a combination of things? Just at a high level.
Yep.
Final question, in the Rotorua section of attachment 1, page 53, it talks about land purchase. Staff are working to secure an additional park to meet the 500-metre walking distance requirements of the open spaces provision policy. Tell me if I'm venturing off into publicly excluded, but I assume we're going to purchase that off a developer now at full retail. Would that be right?
You there, Chris Barton?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm not 100% familiar with that specific project, other than acknowledging that there is a planned and funded project to procure land for park space in the Rotorua area, but I'm not 100% sure on all the mechanisms of how that land is procured. Sorry, Councillor Ryan. So, but we can potentially come back to you offline with an answer to that question if that's okay.
Are you happy with that, Ryan?
Yeah, perhaps just as a note.
As an action item, yeah.
Yeah, just thinking perhaps as just a obviously potentially whether the unity is there into early uplift, or potentially we're applying for the Housing Accelerated Fund around that area for piping, etc. I just wonder if we can work out some, just to make sure that staff are working all possible angles where we don't necessarily have to pay premium dollars for community asset, if that articulates what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Councillor Ewan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Rob. Most of my questions, I think, is to Ian. Ian, just reflecting on what I think roughly is a total of 70 million, well, 70.4 million in deferrals, being the 55.3 for the 2021 and 15.1 from the previous years, for a total of 70.4 million.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just interested in how you're managing the likely material cost increases that we're experiencing currently when it comes to these deferrals, because I'm assuming some of these projects would have attracted DC contributions, etc., in the past.
Without the detail in front of me, but yes, you're correct, Councillor Wilson, that would be right. If they were growth-related deferrals, then they would certainly have DCs attached to them.
And because we've had to delay them, and during the delay, some going back at least 12 months, we've had this escalation in costs of materials. Could you give me an estimate of what the financial ramifications of those additional material costs could add to the current quantum of deferrals?
It's incredibly difficult for me to sit here and give you a number, Councillor Wilson. What I can say, though, is that, and coming back to the portfolio risk I mentioned around current cost escalation, we're saying we need to get an understanding on exactly what that is looking like in terms of a percentage movement up, because the higher this escalation goes, the higher the cost goes to deliver those budgets. That puts pressure on financial strategy. It flows through to your DC modelling. It flows through into your depreciation. It flows through into your interest. And so it's very important that we've got a really good handle and understanding exactly what that quantum is, so that we can come back to you and give you something definitive. But at the end of the day, one could say, if you took a simplistic view and said, if there was a 5% increase across the board, or even 10%, and you did nothing else, what that would do was add upward pressure on your capital program, and therefore your borrowing, and that would flow through into your depreciation interest, and then start to have a detrimental impact on your balance in the books position as well. So that's what we're saying about finance, and through Tracy leading that, understanding the full organisational impacts across the entire budget and the entire program.
Mr. Chair, thank you for that, and thank you for that response. I understood that that's what you were referring to roughly on page 33 with your portfolio risks, but I didn't clearly see a bullet point highlighting that not only does that obviously affect current projects, but it will have a significant effect, one assumes, on historical deferrals. that are still to be completed. And I think more importantly, we've lost the opportunity, one assumes, to be able to recoup those additional costs through DCs, because I guess we can't go back and say, oh, well, look, I'm sorry, we couldn't do the project. It's 2 years later and the costs have gone up.
So I can't see anyone on the, sorry, Councillor Wilson, I cannot see anyone on the line from the development team, but my understanding that no, we have not missed the boat. The DCs are set based on the budgets that go through either through the LTP or through the annual plan, and that's what sets the charges, and that includes the timing. But like everything, at the end of the year, we come back and we plug in the actual spend and the actual progress to date. And the DCs has the ability to have a little bit of flex, and then we can adjust the rate or the DC level the following financial year based on actual progress to date. So you haven't, by any stretch of the imagination, closed a door or restricted or limited yourself to do that simply because a project's been deferred or,
Okay.
or the cost has increased.
Thank you. So I hadn't understood that. So you're saying that in theory, a developer who's paid a DC fee, say in the 2020 financial year, whose council-related project has been deferred, we can go back and say retrospectively, in fact, we were a couple of years late getting this done. Here's your increased DC contribution.
Just to be clear, it's not a retrospective adjustment, Councillor Wilson. We cannot go back and charge somebody more for something they've already paid, but what we can do is we can adjust it from a looking forward perspective, so that the rate going forward reflects the new cost, either the additional cost if the price increases or there's been a timing adjustment.
So are you saying that other developers would then have to bear that cost?
Yeah. I suppose in a very simple terms, yes, but you've got to consider we're analysing, we're reviewing and updating DCs annually. And so, it would have to be you'd have to consider that in the context of the timing. We're not talking about a long period of time where those rates are locked in and people can take advantage of them.
Okay. So my last question, Mr. Chair, if I could, just in relation to the NZTA funding on any of the deferral projects, are you aware of any of those projects having received NZTA funding? And if so, can we go back to them subsequently and ask them for additional money in relation to the fact that there's been cost escalation?
I'm unsure.
Can I jump in on that one, Ian? I think that's a really good point, Councillor Wilson. A live example may be the Peacocks program. So some of our deferrals relate to cash flow for Peacocks. So we're just dealing with escalation issues on Peacocks at the moment. So if I can pick up the notion that you've floated and report back on that one. It is a very good question and something we were looking at already.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan. Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. My question was in regard to the Whakareki external funding and the co-funding. If there are projects, which it sounds like there likely will be, that aren't going to receive co-funding, what are our options in terms of still progressing things, at least to a point where you have, say, business cases complete, designs ready, to then be in a position to get co-funding for things to progress?
Shall I pick that one up? Chris is here again. We need to wait and see what the decisions are. I think that on some of our critical projects, they may still fund works to keep progressing the projects in terms of business case and pre-implementation work. We don't know, but that's something that we have heard. Councillors will also recall that in regard to the Borman Road project, we've put in an application to the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, anticipating a decline of NZ or Waka Kotahi subsidy on that. So there are other avenues that we're looking at to compensate for any loss in the revenue. But I think we will know within the next week just the outcome of that, and we'll be reporting that fully back to council, and probably including project by project analysis and maybe opportunities for council with funding on their own to keep progressing the development of some of the projects. I think a lot of the decisions that council might be faced with are about prioritisation, and some of our, for example, low cost, low risk programs, if we don't get the funding that we expected, there will be options for council to reprioritise within those funding. So they're all really good questions, and as soon as we know the outcome, we're poised to analyse the program and come back to committee or council.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Chair. The other question was just in regard to, I have to actually double check, it was this report. I'll come back to you,
Okay.
Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxine.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, with regard to the portfolio risks, Ian, that you talked about, and maybe this is a question really for Chris, what other mitigants are we in a position to be able to deploy? And might there also be an opportunity for us to take advantage of economies of scale by potentially stockpiling of materials, etc., to help us with those risks that are future for us?
Yeah, I can answer some of that. So that's a good point, Councillor Maxine. So there's also a report that comes to the Strategic Risk and Assurance Committee, which outlines a little bit more detail around a mitigation plan around this and the action plans. But one of those key mechanisms, as you note, is advanced ordering of materials and having existing contractual commitments in place. So that is something we're looking at on a project by project perspective to help mitigate this risk. It does come with some potential issues, so we do need to deploy it in the right situation and for the right components where we've got enough surety that we're getting the right materials, so that again we don't end up with wastage or redundant outcomes. But that is certainly a mechanism which we are looking to deploy. The other pieces are largely we're doing, as outlined previously, a more detailed analysis across our portfolio to where some of those key, particularly material risks, lie at the moment, and what our exposures are, so that we can deploy further inform those mitigation plans.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Maxine. Councillor Sarah?
Yeah. Thanks, Chair Rob. Yeah, it was in this report. It was just around the work in progress. I was wondering, Ian, if you could explain that to me a little bit more in terms of what makes it difficult to kind of get from work in progress to capitalisation.
I think I've mentioned this before, Councillor Thompson, but unfortunately, and I say that nicely, is that council invariably is building and constructing very large, complex assets, as opposed to maybe a simple purchase of a motor vehicle or a pump, for etc. What we need to do once the asset has either been constructed or vested, for that matter, is the asset then has to be analysed and broken down into the various components that can be loaded through into the asset management systems. Now that's critical for long-term asset management purposes, so we know what assets we've got out there. So We've got to go through a number of steps in terms of analysing that, looking at as-built plans, engineers analysing and determining exactly what components are out there, breaking it down, loading it into the asset management system. And then once we've got that certainty around that, then we do the cost allocation of it, taking it off the WIP balance through onto the balance sheet. So it's just the nature of the beast a little bit in terms of the complexity. Having said that, it's an industry, it's not an issue we have, and we should be able to do it. I think we just need to have our systems a little bit more geared up to be hitting the ground running a little bit at the moment than we do. But that really in a nutshell is the reason it's complex. As you can appreciate, for example, without boring you, as Almond accountant, you look at a road and it might look like one asset, but it's very built up of multiple components, from curb and channel to base course to sub-base to seal to a whole bunch of things. They all must be recorded as separate individual components within the asset management systems.
Okay, now that makes sense, and I see that this will come back to the strategic risk committee and at some point as well. So it's as we work through it.
Oh, 100%. And that was the reason we chose to bring our internal, through finance, to bring the internal auditor through in this, so that not only will it give it some visibility through the finance committee, but it will bring it on through the internal auditor reporting to the strategic audit and growth committee, risk committee, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I don't see any further questions on the board. My one question follows on from Councillor Sarah, and that's about the 60.5 million that's outstanding for capitalisation. You mentioned, Ian, that we've vamped up and got a bit of a team working on bringing that number down. We're sort of 6 weeks into we were 6 weeks into the new financial year before the lockdown. What progress have we made in terms of getting that 60.5 million down to something that's where the organisation feels comfortable?
Look, the reality is, Rob, since the end of the financial year, I appreciate it's been 6 weeks, we are continuing with the effort that was put in at the end of the financial year. If you start to analyse that 60 million, you'll notice that you would see that a lot of it is actually in the vested asset area. And so we've continued to put our foot down in terms of making sure that that is not becoming a bottleneck for us. What's probably more concerning to us, or more of a concern in using the internal auditor and the Paul Gower team, is that we want to put in place some robust, reliable, dependable processes that will put us in good stead this month, next year, into the future, so that we don't have to come back to this committee with any further bad news stories for you.
Yeah, we've had the problem before, haven't we, in the past? And I know that Audit New Zealand have been critical over a number of years around the extent of the value of this uncapitalised work in progress. Are you anticipating the same happening this year while the audit's being undertaken? Or is that something I should put to Tracy when she presents her report?
Look, Tracy will no doubt would like to comment on this, Rob. My reply to that comment would be, my expectation was, you're right, Audit New Zealand have picked this up in previous audits around this issue. It does tend to be around the underpinning processes that we have in terms of the capitalisation, and I would be surprised if they do not mention it again to us. So while we've made an assessment on that estimated value of depreciation that's related to it, and therefore that has the material impact on the operating statement, we've dealt with that. What's happening though is we still have a large amount sitting there that we should have capitalised, and so I would expect they will make a comment to us and remind us that we need to do better in this space.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Councillor Ryan has moved that we receive the report. Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Is there any debate? No? Okay, those in favour, we'll use our hands, shall we? Against?
Carried unanimously.
Thanks, Becca. Okay, let's move on now to the next report in the trilogy that we get each time.
Can I just suggest, Councillor Rob, that we have a toilet break?
Oh yes, I see it's 11:51. Yes, let's do that. Let's come back at 12:10.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. welcome back, everybody. Before we continue with the meeting, I just want to give you a governance request, and that is to record retrospectively an apology for Mayor Paula, who is away on council business. I think there's been a botch up somewhere in the communication, so if I'm happy to move that we record Mayor Paula's absence. Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Councillor Maxine. All done, Becca?
Yep, I was just trying to work out if we had quorum there, Rob.
Okay.
I think we do now with Jeff on, so that should be fine. As Jeff agrees with that as well.
Okay. Yep, he does. Thank you.
Cool.
All right, let's move on and welcome Tracy. Tracy to the screen. And we're now on item number 9, which is item number 8, which is the annual monitoring report. And that should read, I don't know whether that's been corrected on the subsequent one, but that should be the annual monitoring report to the 30th of June 2021.
That's right. Thank you, Councillor Rob.
Tracy.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone. So yes, I am here today to present you our full and final results for the year end 30th of June 2021. As Ian mentioned in his report earlier, these are still draft results, as we do currently have the auditors with us and auditing the results. So they are still working through a few things. So there is potential that what you're seeing today with these results and what ends up in the annual report itself could still change. So I'm pleased to report that the council finished the year from both an accounting result perspective and a balancing the books perspective quite significantly more favourable to budget. The $76.2 million favourable variance in their accounting result is largely due to the $22 million gain that we had on the revaluation swaps. You'll remember that as part of the work we did last year leading into the annual plan, we changed some of the timing on some of our existing fixed hedges, and we've actually only just taken out some new fixed hedges in the last month or so, so we haven't done that for a few years now. So this has meant we've been able to take advantage of the market swap interest rates increasing, which has resulted in that gain on our books. So again, I'd just like to remind the committee that this is an accounting entry only and will never be realised, so it's not cash, but obviously is a significant variance or part of the variance that we do have. The other main contributors to our accounting result is the $14 million favourable variance in the fees and charges. Capital revenue as well received $14 million favourable variance. And then the DC invested revenue also showed a favourable variance of $6.5 million. And remember that the fees and charges, capital revenue and DC is all cash. So we're also reporting gains in our asset areas. So you'll see that we had increased valuations that were completed on our land and buildings for this year. So that favourable variance in fees and charges also contributes to our balancing the books favourable result, along with the savings in our finance costs area and depreciation. So Chair Rob, just alluding to what Ian mentioned before in the WIP, I know this is always a bit of a concern with you. So yes, we have done an accrual for that outstanding assets that haven't been capitalised, and that is included in our depreciation result today. So we've also talked about personnel costs quite a lot this year. So I guess just to summarise, in this area, we finished the year $4 million unfavourable to budget. Some of this, though, is offset in our revenue account. So we've completed some additional projects. So the operational Te Awa cycleway. So again, remember that project was split into 2 parts. We have an operational one and a capital one. We also had a lot of additional events during the year in H3. And our visitor destination areas. So again, they brought on extra staff, but they also contributed the extra revenue as well. And we're still carrying quite higher costs than normal in our annual leave balances, again, because of obviously the situation that we're in. And we were unable to achieve in the end the majority of our vacancy factor. And again, reminding the committee that that is really due to the stability of our workforce, which isn't a bad thing in some ways, as people kind of aren't moving around so much, as well as we had some unanticipated quite high recruitment spend to obviously get in some key resources that we needed. In the administration line, you'll see that we're showing an $11.5 million favourability. This is the theatre grant that we didn't pay out during this year. So again, I'd just like to remind committee that while that's a savings in this year, we have included that in the long-term budget over years 1 and 2 in the long-term plan. So we did make that change while we were doing the long-term plan. So our borrowing position finished this year in a much more favourable position than anticipated. So this is again due to the unexpected cash from fees and charges and DCs, as well as obviously the less cash spent in the capital portfolio, which you've just heard Ian talk about today, and the theatre grant as well, because obviously that was a cash payment. So, and again, just to note that we will finish the year fully compliant with all of our council policy measures with regards to Treasury. So with that, I will happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Tracy. Oh, good, I've got my screen back now. I don't see any hands up. Sarah, have you a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Tracy, my question was just in regard to the vacancy factor. So you said we hadn't met the majority of that, particularly with the difficult employment market that we're seeing at the moment. Is it time to be kind of reconsidering that whole premise?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. So because of what we did see last year when we looked at the savings targets for the new long-term plan, with the actual split of what we've included for savings in this particular area for year 1 and ongoing is a lot less than what we normally would do. So instead, we've put some of those savings targets in other areas such as admin and things like that. So you're right, we've actually looked at it and realised that it's probably not something we can continue to do naturally, which is kind of what it was falling out of.
Okay, and at the level that it's at now, so what's the level that it's at now? That
I think off the top of my head, we're only targeting $1 million across the whole organisation for next year, or this year that we're currently in, if you like. So,
and do you see that having any material impact on, I guess, staffing and staff workload and well-being and things? Because just with workloads being really heavy, that's what we're hearing.
Absolutely, and that's why we sort of decided that it should be at a lower level. What it's supposed to do is naturally pick up the changes of staff movement. So if someone leaves, it normally takes you 2 to 3 months to employ the next person. So you automatically have a savings in that space. However, and the other thing at the moment is we obviously have all those budgeted roles, but as you're also aware, it's taking us a long time to try and recruit for them as well, and it's really hard to recruit. So automatically we have a savings per se for that. So again, it's something that going forward more and more, we will have to keep reassessing and decide if that's actually a target or something that we want to be proactively doing, as opposed to putting it in perhaps another area of council.
Yeah, I just wonder if it should be seen as more just an estimate of what realistically is going to happen rather than any target.
Absolutely.
It kind of seems, it's always seemed a bit wrong to me, but particularly in this market, even now more. So what is if we want to review that as an annual plan thing again okay.
Can I just interrupt you there, Sarah, and ask Tracy, and I see David's screen has lit up too. We did have a briefing planned on these CE savings targets because I think somehow it's sort of morphed into the long-term plan without us having, without elected members having a lot of oversight on how much and where these savings were likely to be achieved. Is that briefing still on the map, or has it?
Yeah, it is. Councillor Rob, obviously lockdown impacted that. We were supposed to have the briefing just the other week. What we have done is just push that out to take into account the fact that, and also the savings report we're going to bring to this committee, we'll bring to the next finance committee. But what we want to do is bring you a real detailed understanding of how we're going to track savings and what the components of those savings are going to be. And certainly this conversation would be a good precursor to any decisions you'd like to make in the annual plan going forward. I do think what Councillor Sarah was talking about, and this is a reality that we all just need to be aware of. With unemployment at 4% in New Zealand and very difficult to recruit staff, we need to be able to be balancing the priority projects with maybe some projects that we'd like to get done but can't get done because we just don't have that number of staff. That's the wellbeing topic that we use as a lens across all the activities across council, and just really committing to all of elected members that we will come to you when we're struggling to actually deliver on the work program as we have planned, and that we need some relief in terms of some timeframes around certain projects, because we can't have heroic efforts from some of our staff that all of a sudden they fall over, right? So we need to care for them as well as get the job done. So it'll be about prioritisation.
Yep, thanks, David. Sorry, Sarah, have you got further questions?
No, that's all. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions of Tracy? All right, I'll move that we receive the annual monitoring report to the 30th of June 2021. Councillor Ewan, you seconded that. Is there any debate? No debate. Those in favour, we'll do this by show of hands. Against?
Carried unanimously.
Thanks, Becca. We now move on to item number 9, and Tracy, stay on the screen for the financial strategy monitoring report.
All right, so this report shows that we finished the year with a debt to revenue ratio of 149% compared with our annual plan budget of 206%. So remembering that we were quite conservative with our annual plan budget this year with regards to revenue, and however, as I've just alluded to, we ended up doing much better than what we had anticipated. And again, you'll note the balancing the books graph in paragraph 24, just showing that $3 million surplus in actuals against a budget of a $4 million deficit. So you also note that we have included the 2021 31 LTP numbers as well in those two graphs, just for that first year, as was requested at the last committee meeting. So just to realise that this is, everything you're seeing now is very much around finishing off this June 2021 year. So once we're finished, obviously from the deferrals that you've heard about today from Ian's report, and we get full and final audited results, we'll transfer all of those opening balances, and then the next committee that we have, which will be on the August results, will include all of the new forecasted opening balances and things for our ratios that you're seeing now. So I'll take the report as read, noting the recommendations to be taken on the council on the capital movements as highlighted in Ian's report, and our operating adjustments as per paragraph 20 of this report.
Thank you, Tracy. Any questions? There being none, I move the staff recommendation in paragraph 4. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Maxine?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Speaking in debate, look, I just make a couple of very, very brief statements. This is a good news story. I think our financial results for the year are extremely good coming out of the end of the first COVID lockdown. And here's hoping that the next one that we're in at the moment isn't going to last anywhere near as long as the last one. It's a good news story. I think the only negative is around capitalisation of assets, and that is a personnel resourcing issue, but it is really one that I personally would like us to get on top of. Clearly, the financial statements, the results are subject to external audit, but traditionally we have not seen significant changes coming about from Audit New Zealand, given often that they've done an interim audit earlier in the year, and really this end of year audit is a matter of just tying up the transactions that have happened subsequent to that interim audit and the end of year adjustment. So my thanks and congratulations go out to David, Tracy, and their very expert team, and here's some pretty positive figures that they can eventually now plug in to the start of the new LTP. Thank you. So any other speakers? All right, let's move. Let's vote by a show of hands. Those in favour? Against?
Carried unanimously.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy. We now move on to item number 10, which is the Watertight annual update. And Corey, I think I saw his name here earlier on. Welcome, Corey.
One moment, councillors. Sorry, I'm not sure what's going on here. I think you can see me, but hear me, but can't see me.
We can hear you, but not see you.
Okay.
Is your laptop's screen up?
Yeah, let me pull the laptop up. Apologies, everybody. One moment.
That's it.
Excellent.
Welcome, Corey.
Apologies about that. Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you, Chair Rob. So this is an annual report on our building claims provision. I just want to highlight a couple of paragraphs, if I may, to draw your attention to a couple of changes in this year's report. Paragraph 18 in particular has been added in to provide greater clarity and representation of our claims within the provision itself, specifying the difference between our weathertight claims and our building defect claims. You'll see them illustrated within paragraph 19, and further paragraph 30, which is a representation of where Hamilton City Council sits with across the larger metros, and I guess a better feel for where our claims sit across the country. Otherwise, happy to take the report as read and answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yeah, Councillor Maxine.
Look, earlier in the meeting, we've been warned about the growing costs of resourcing and staffing. And look, I wondered whether you're confident that the provision that you've made in 22, 3.006 million is adequate, or whether it might need to be adjusted for future claims that you might be aware of.
Sure, great question, councillor. So these figures and the table within the report are based on actual claims that we have now. So that's a basis for how we've identified our exposure on the claims that we have, not a representation of what resourcing or future risk that we may see from current building or activity. So this is a real representation of our existing claims.
Thank you. And that we don't have an understanding of what might be a future risk?
We're constantly reviewing, I guess, the wider landscape of building defects, particularly across the larger metros. And obviously, we're always looking at our systems and processes. More and more, we're looking at external reviews that are carried out, both externally on us and on the processes that we have in place. And I guess we constantly try and adapt and manage those risks as the industry changes.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Maxine. No other questions? Now, just one very quick question, and that is also around paragraph 22, Corey. The $3 million provision, that's already been expensed in the financial statements in this and earlier years?
That's correct. So as we've amended our provision on an annual basis, we've increased that. And so this is as at end of financial year, 30th of June.
Yep, thank you. All right, if there's no further discussion, I will move that the Finance Committee receives the report. Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Is there any debate? No debate. All right, those in favour, we'll do this also by a show of hands. Those in favour? Against?
Carried unanimously.
Thanks, Becca. All right, item number 11, the Zoo Whakareki entry precinct stage 1B. And to present that report, we have Rebecca and Leanne, and I see Lance has popped up too.
It's actually me, Chair Rob.
Okay.
Apologies, believe it or not, Leanne's on leave today, so I'm not sure what she's doing on leave, but she's having a few days off.
Staying at home.
Yeah, obviously. And I've also got Chris Barton from Chris's team, and also Gina Halewood, who's the project manager for this project, on the line as well, so they can answer any questions. I thought I'd just get Narelle to put up a little bit of a presentation, which will just give a little bit of context about what's happening, give a little bit of an update, just so spatially, just so elected members can sort of get their heads around this. A little bit complex when you start talking about stages 1A and 1B and things like that. So Narelle, just want to go to the next slide, thanks. Great, thanks. So this first one here just shows the different stages to the project. So if you look at the blue lines is stage 1, which we're working on at the moment. Stage 1B is within the blue lines. It's the yellow lines, which is some of the entry elements to Whakareki as you come across the road from the zoo, which has got a path, a canopy. It's got the Rongoa boardwalk and also the viewing tower as well. Stage 2 is the more orange lines that you can see, which includes all the roading, and you can probably make out the 30 kilometres an hour dotted line there, where there's traffic calming and the speed limit's going to be dropped, so it's a lot safer precinct through there, especially around the zebra crossing, where people will be able to cross the road from some of the car parking on the eastern side to get to the zoo entrance on the western side.
Lance, if I can just interrupt for elected members, these slides are also in the presentation area of our agenda, if you want to look at them and be able to pinch up the size of them. So, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Rob. The legend's a little bit small, as you can see on the screen, so the next slide will probably get a bit clearer. The red blob is actually stage 3, which is the education centre, which isn't funded at the moment. So if we go to the next slide, Narelle. So in stage 1, this is just a few shots of showing how we're going. Things are progressing pretty well. There's a few photographs there of the building just before lockdown. You can see the shape of the new arrival area and visitor centre and cafe, some of the panelled wood that's going in the overhang there, which you can see. And you can see the comparison with the artist's impression there as well. And then some of the outside areas that are related to that arrival area. So if we want to go to the next slide, this will give you a bit more detail around stage 1B, which has, if you see number 1, the ones that are there is a pathway connecting to Whakareki. It's got some entry elements such as marker posts. There's a Waharoa gateway, which is a Māori carving, and there's also wayfinding. So in that number 1, that's when you've read the report, you see that we've managed to get $620,000 of external funding of the 1.8. That's what would actually fund on the eastern side of the road. And then what's not funded are 2, 3 and 4, which is the walkway canopy over the walkway, which is number 2 there, and also the immersive boardwalk area to the top of the walkway, which is a boardwalk area which has a whole bunch of different types of vegetation, which sort of replicates what's in the park, so people get a good view of what they're going to experience in the park. We're also going to have QR codes there, so there's going to be some technology where people can actually use their phones and that sort of thing to get information up, which will tell them more of the story and that sort of thing. And then the tower is number 4. Now, it's not just a tower, looking tower, it's also got some elements below it for people to wash their hands, for education classes that'll come over with Ken and his team from the zoo. They'll be holding education classes in Whakareki. So it's not just a viewing tower, it's actually got a number of different elements to it. If we can have the next slide, please. And this just shows you the path connecting to Whakareki, those entry elements I talked about with the Waharoa, which gives you an idea. Probably one, you probably be aware there's one in Te Parapara Garden. There's also one at the Waikato Stadium as well. And wayfinding signage, things like that, so you can see those marker posts. They could actually be po, those sorts of things, and we'll be working with Mana Whenua and others around those. And if we can just have the next slide. So then we get into the ones which, if we didn't do what the staff recommendation is that these would be missing from the project, which is the walkway canopy, which is obviously to keep people dry as they cross the road and that sort of thing. But the walkway canopy actually heads towards the road. You can see the zebra crossing there on the second picture on the right-hand side. And that also visually helps with slowing vehicles down and that sort of thing as well. So it's quite important to be part of those traffic calming features from a visual point of view. If we could have the next slide, thanks. This is just a bit of detail around the Rongoa immersive boardwalk. I'm not going to read through all that. You can have a look in Diligent at the detail there. I've talked about some of the elements in there, but also includes interactive natural play elements, which I know Councillor Bunting will be thrilled about. So it's including a whole bunch of things, educative play, and also that connection as well, so that we tell the story as people go from one part of the precinct to another, from the western side of the road to the eastern side of the road and vice versa. A whole lot of opportunities to tell cultural stories as well in a bunch of different ways, as I said, with technology and also things on site. And then if we just come to the last slide, then this just shows the tower, which also has the overhangs for the education groups to have classes there, people to wash their hands after they've been, probably volunteers and that sort of thing, they've been down in the park, or people have been down there, and you know what it's like with kids and that sort of stuff, to be touching plants and different things like that. So it's an opportunity for people to wash their hands, which is very important, obviously, with things happening at the moment. So that's just a few slides just to give you a bit of flavour about what are the elements that we'd like to include, which aren't funded at the moment. Just around the external funding targets, I'd just like to say that there's been a lot of effort over the last 3 years gone into looking for funds for this. Applications to PGF fund for 4 million. We've applied to Trust Waikato twice for 700,000. Tourism Infrastructure Fund twice for 2.5 million. Shovel Ready project put in. And also we recently got declined for the Waikato Regional Council Regional Development Fund, an application for 1.4 million. So significant applications have gone in, a lot of work's gone into that. We've had really positive feedback. A lot of the feedback coming from funders is that with COVID, the world's changed. They're looking for a lot more social impact type projects, which may not just be bricks and mortar and those sorts of things. On top of that, we've also put 3 sponsorship proposals to some private businesses. They haven't come to fruition, There's probably one of those where we're still working on that, and I think that would be a more longer term type project, and just to work with them. Just on our recent funders meeting, the focus was on zoo Whakareki. A lot of the feedback is around people were finding that they would probably be more inclined to fund things like animal enclosures. So like in a few years' time when we look at getting otters, there's interest in that. And obviously we've got some money there for a feasibility study around the predator-proof fence at Whakareki. And there's quite a bit of interest around if we did go ahead with building a predator-proof fence, that some corporates would be quite interested in getting involved in that. So it's interesting the feedback we're getting. So obviously we've got to just channel what we're doing. So what we're suggesting in the options, if council's not of a mind to go beyond the external funds that we've got at the moment, obviously we would just go to option 2, which is pretty much just doing the walkway over to Whakareki, no canopy, not a lot of the interactive stuff, and no tower, and what comes with the tower there as well. You could defer the whole lot if you wanted to. It'll probably look pretty bare on that side of the road, apart from a car park. The other option which we've suggested and recommended as staff is to complete the whole lot now. There's some advantages to that. We can shift the external funding target around, so bring some money forward from the capital program, and then shift the external funding target to one of those animal enclosures further out in the 10-year plan, which we think has probably got more likelihood of success, and by then hopefully we're out of COVID as well. So there's some real options there. The other thing which has come up in previous items in the meeting is that if we hold off on these now, it's estimated by Chris and Gina and the team is that we would probably be paying anywhere from $70,000 to $100,000 more. I just want you to be aware that we have actually allowed in the project so that we can actually, we've got separable portions in our tendering and that sort of thing. So it is possible to be flexible around this, but our recommendation is to go ahead. We've got this vision for this shared entrance precinct. And as Bruce Clarkson said this morning, it would be good to do it all at one stage, not having to come back and then making a mess again there later on and that sort of thing. Get it done once, get it done properly. I'll leave it there, Chair Rob, and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Lance. I've got some questions up on the board there. Councillor Mark first. You're on mute, Mark.
There we go. Sorry. Thanks, Lance, and thanks, staff, for the report. So we are striking out when it comes to external funding with this part of the project, and you feel that an animal enclosure will be more attractive to external funders down the track. Why have they given you any reason as to why we are striking out with this? Why are we not? Why is it not hitting the mark with external funders?
Look, they've said the applications are of good quality. They have said that they've had an increase in the amount of applications they've had, and they've had to reprioritise. And if you look at the Tourism Infrastructure Fund, they have had some priorities like the West Coast and some of those areas which have been hit hard by COVID. They have said that would be their priority, but they would look at other projects. So we were probably coming in for that particular fund on a little bit on the back foot and that sort of thing. But what we're saying is there's just a lot more competition now. And the game has changed a little bit. My view is I think as we go forward, I think that we have got some opportunities, and we got some good leads from our recent funders meeting, which we've got 8 very good leads, which myself and others have been following up on. And those are actually quite exciting, and we will be bringing a whole external funding report back to committee soon. Right. And there'll be some commercial sensitivities in that report, which some of it will be in public excluded, some will be in open, so we'll be able to talk about the wider remit. Right. But basically competition, the game's changed, and there's probably some of the focus has gone on to more social impact type investments rather than just bricks and mortar.
Okay, because the feedback we've sort of had over the years with the zoo in particular is that it doesn't qualify for some of the funding because it's a profit making or it's a business model. Do you think that the zoo and Whakareki are positioned well enough as a joint entity yet to be attractive to sponsors?
Yes and no. I think yes to a certain degree. I think no, we can be better. And I think that's about telling that whole vision about the whole precinct, which is, I believe is unique with the, the native fauna and flora on one side of the road. And then we've got native and exotic on the other side of the road, but also got an observatory. We're looking at overnight accommodation and a whole bunch of other things that go with the cafe and the offerings there. So I think it's about telling that story better going forward.
Okay. And last question, are we approaching the right sponsors? You mentioned we had about 8 leads from a function we had recently. There's probably potentially more sponsors out there, and I'm hearing a lot of the same names of, same funds, etc. Are we spreading a net wide enough?
We can always do better. We have got a few new ones. Yes, there's some of the usual suspects. But what I've done recently is we've hired in some outside resource to help us with that. And I'm quite confident that moving forward, we will expand our strategy around that so that we can actually, really hone in on 75 of the, key businesses and high net worth individuals around Hamilton in a Waikato area. I think the key thing with the zoo, Whakareki, and anything, whether it's Hamilton Gardens or a bridge over the pedestrian bridge over the river, etc., in the CBD, is actually getting people who are passionate about the project. And I think that's the key thing that we've got to find and work through that. That takes time. And as we've found with Hamilton Gardens, and Peter Sergel was an expert at this, some of these leads take 2 or 3 years to come to fruition.
Right. Sorry, Rob, that was the second last question. Question is, how's the zoo been performing in the last year? Because it's done pretty well.
Yeah, I think Tracy mentioned it in her summary before, 1.2 million up on revenue and what our budget was. And yes, we decreased our revenue budgets because of COVID, but it was actually ahead of the previous year's revenue. So not a bad result considering, even when you compare it to 2019.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Lance. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Ryan.
Thanks, Chair Rob. Lance, a few questions. Firstly, with the 630K you've received to date, can you remind me of the breakdown between Vibrant Hamilton, Well and EB Firth?
Yep, so Vibrant Hamilton, 210,000, EB Firth, 20,000, Well Energy, there was 2 lots of that, 290,000 from them, 100,000, and then 190,000 in 2021, which is the result of when we went to submit on their annual plan.
Great. You've run, I think, 3 sort of partnership fundraising events specifically for these areas. How much philanthropic support has been raised to date from the private sector?
Look, we have had a bequest for the zoo. It hasn't been included in this part of the project because the bequest had some conditions with it. So that actually went towards the Tuatara house, which is about to open, which the previous one was pretty well knackered, to be honest. So we built a new one, which is just near the Parrot Court. Outside of the big funders, that's our next target. I think we're on fertile ground there, and some of those sponsorship proposals that we've talked about have been leads through contractors that have been working there, and also through staff and some other individuals as well through their personal connections. As I said before, I think that's an area we can do a lot better in, and that's why I've hired in some outside expertise to actually work with us on that, so that we can get a real campaign around this and actually target that more individual family type donor that are out there that will have a passion for this.
Why at the recent funding event at Panama was there no mention of that funding gap on our LTP in terms of the gap that people could then have the opportunity to step up and contribute to?
We did allude to it. There was probably some learnings from the messaging that we put across, and a learning for me was it might have been better for a council staff member to do that part of the presentation rather than an MC that was involved.
Just on that, also wonder why it was brochures given out with that sort of gold, silver, bronze, but there was no figures on it. It was just this sort of wishy-washy document. It seemed like a real missed opportunity.
What we've done is we have followed up on those, and everyone there has had a follow-up. Generally, what we like to do is to have the personal conversation with people and just make those connections and get those relationships going.
I guess final question, Lance, you mentioned that you've got an external consultant coming in now. Why haven't elected members had more visibility around this external funding gap and or opportunity? Because this has been going on, well, certainly the 3 years I've been on council.
We have been bringing regular reports to committees. I think, and there has been some discussion in previous administrations. We've had a subcommittee or a working group, and I know there has been some discussions around that. I personally think that would work quite well. I've found that worked well in the past, where you have some keen individuals, and something I've been talking to Chair Mark about can we reinstate that going forward? So a bit like some of the other advisory groups we have, so that we can have elected members working closely with staff to do that. So that's definitely part of our thinking going forward.
Thanks, Chair.
Deputy Mayor Jeff.
Thanks, Chair Rob. G'day, Lance. The point 4 in the report, we describe Whakareki as a key visitor destination. How many visitors are we getting there at the moment?
We're getting about 60,000 annually, remembering the park's only been open officially for a couple of years. And up until probably 18 months ago, the infrastructure there was, rudimentary. And so word of mouth's getting out there now. Obviously, you compare that to the zoo, where we're getting, 140 to 160,000 a year. If we can, with what we've got at in the entrance precinct, what we've got, I think that you'll get people might want to do both, where they have an experience at Whakareki as well as inside the zoo.
Okay, no, I just wondered if it might be a bit premature to call it a key visitor destination already, but no big deal. I understand the principle of getting on with the shared entrance precinct and doing a good job with it. And the third option that staff have recommended makes sense to me. I'm just a bit concerned about the funding shortfall for it, and I guess it makes me wonder, is it possible that we understand the vision for the zoo and Whakareki, but the community doesn't quite get it? I mean, is it possible that we are overestimating the appeal of this dual function facility in the wider community?
A little bit, yes, at the moment, but I think if you ever start with a vision, you've got to start somewhere and then grow it. And I think as that gets clearer and we get clearer in our message, and then actually portraying that to the community, it's about how you do that and then actually grow that constituency of support. So I think, and I think we've done that, really. Whakareki was, some farmland not so long ago, and look what's happened since then. I think that if we can really tell clearly the unique prospect there, then we will have a good proposition.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to do, is get a real good comms plan around that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I'm not doubting its ultimate appeal, and the Hamilton Gardens is a wonderful example of what you can do with vision. I guess I'm a little worried about the next few years and how much external funding might we be looking for Whakareki, and maybe whether this is a red flag that we need to retabulate that and lower our expectations.
That's something we'll be doing. Like, I'm just with a staff member leaving recently, we're just reviewing our whole program, and if we've got any concerns around that, we'll bring that to elected members. Okay.
Do you think it does need to be retabulated a bit? Do you think maybe we need to set our sights for external funding, given that it hasn't come through this time, whereas the animal enclosures seem to be a lot more of an easy sell? Maybe we need to lower our sights, and does that mean we need to scale back the development program at Whakareki a bit too?
Look, we've still got a lot of work to do on trees, planting trees, and that's generally, we've been quite successful in that. We haven't included that in these figures, and we've generally had the WAG group and TUI 2000 and others, do those applications, and they've had significant success in that. So I think there's real opportunity there, but it's always worth reviewing things. And we were all chugging along nicely after our last lockdown, and things were looking up. But and then voila, we're in another lockdown again. So it'll be interesting to see how it knocks the business community, or if it does. So I think it's always worthwhile in this COVID world to review things going forward.
Thank you, Lance, and thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Jeff. No further questions I can see on the screen. So let's move to the staff recommendation on paragraph 3. And I will move. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Mark. Is there any debate? Yeah, Councillor Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I'm a real supporter of the zoo. In my time on council, I helped get some stuff over the line, the 2018 10-year plan with the support of others, and continued that with this 10-year plan. From an economic development point of view, you and I have been unashamedly proud to support, to enhance, recognising the economic opportunity this brings to the city, the environmental overlays with Whakareki, and just super keen to support it. It's been the unloved cousin compared to the gardens, and I don't want to see us stall a special opportunity here, so I'm happy to support it. In regards to the external fundraising, I am disappointed. I've been to 3 events now. Real missed opportunities in my boat. In my view, I've expressed a keen desire to get involved, whether it's an external fundraising committee or something. There's certainly a real disconnect there. And I understand we've lost a staff member that was quite involved with this, which is disappointing, because we lose rapport. Rapport leads to relationship, and relationship ultimately leads to revenue. And I know we keep banging the typical trust funds. We had a win with Well Energy, which was good. Given their new CEO, that may change. But there's such an untapped potential in the private sector that we are just not accessing, and I cannot emphasize this enough. Anyway, I keep banging on about it, but I just see the opportunity just continuously walking by, and it's not just for this opportunity with the zoo. There's playgrounds, there's a whole bunch of other stuff as well that sits outside of the community portfolio. But I look forward to the opportunity to really lean in when I have confidence that the organisation will respond in a nimble and commercial and an opportune way that brings more of the community and the business sectors with us.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Councillor Mark.
Thanks, Chair Rob, and fully endorse what Ryan's saying. Actually, I agree. There is a an untapped potential. Hence, we've tried to get things like the Creative Partnership Fund going with businesses. I've asked for a report from staff during the community thing about how to make it easier for people to get involved in funding playgrounds, etc. So doing my best in that front, but I my ears perked up when we talked about the fundraising committee, and it's something I'd like to acknowledge late Margaret on, because she was really good in the last 2 terms ago on that fundraising committee, and I thought that was really successful, and it paid big dividends with the gardens. So I'll be fully supportive of getting that cranked up, way before this term has ended. I wish the funds had come pouring in. But times are tough, and I think the Deputy Mayor's questions were really, really good, and that we constantly need to be checking that our plans are on point. I think by moving the external fundraising to the animal enclosure, it more reflects where the market's at this moment. So I'm really happy with this. There was a proposal earlier on to use some of those zoo profits that we made last term, because it's really being a rock star at the moment in our portfolio. But I'm glad we've moved to this, because I think it's a much more sound proposal. So I'm happy to second it.
Thanks, Councillor Mark. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you. I noticed the conversation. I think I heard somewhere we weren't successful with the Waikato Regional Council. Is that correct?
Yep.
Correct.
Yes, which highlights the fact that we're hosting a regional facility here, and that's obviously a broader issue in terms of the work that we do. But I think the good news is this is a really important step along the way. Great pleasure to be back in 2001 with the then Minister of Conservation, Chris Carter, as we were celebrated, if you like, a milestone, the launch of the Whakareki way back in the mid-80s, in terms of when the zoo was not going to continue, and a lot of people saved the zoo from carrying on. But I just want to say, I think this particular project obviously will be a really significant milestone. And in that regard, I want to strongly thank Professor Clarkson for coming to council and urging us to proceed with this project, and also the incredibly spirited and strong support he had from our previous Mayor, Andrew King. So shout out to both of those. In terms of external funding, one would hope that this particular project, once finished, will actually probably also add to the attractiveness of the total project in terms of attracting that funding. And it's not too long bow to draw to think of people associating Hamilton with obviously the theatre, the museum, river precinct, of course the Hamilton Gardens, and thirdly this incredible combined major facility in terms of the zoo and Whakareki, which this particular project will underscore and outline. So I'm really personally, while it has financial challenges, I'm incredibly excited. Want to thank Lance and the team for all of their hard work in this particular area.
Thanks, Martin. Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I'll also be supporting the staff recommendation. Firstly, I think that in terms of the shared entry precinct and getting the external funding and the challenges that come with that, I think we do need to actually look at what funders want to fund, and they are saying, we want to fund environmental initiatives, but that might look more like funding tree planting or a fence or something like that, rather than necessarily a viewing tower. So I think we have to be in tune with what funders are looking at, and then decide on which projects we're going to seek external funding for based on that. And that way we'll have the best chance of success and use our resources most efficiently. In terms of Whakareki, I was a little concerned to hear of the suggestion of slowing down development there. There's a lot of planting to be done, and a lot of work to support the work the community has already put into creating Whakareki. In June of this year, I went to a community planting day where we planted 18,000 trees in just a few hours. And there were hundreds of school students there. And this has happened every year for many years, where people in the community have come and gotten involved. And so Whakareki is a place which has been created by many hands, and is going to be a place where people can not only enjoy nature within our city, but also learn a lot more about biodiversity and the importance of nature going forward. So I think that we do need to stay true to that larger vision. There's still a lot more work to be done. And I think a lot of people already do see that vision, because otherwise why would they be out there on a Saturday or Sunday morning getting dirty, planting trees? And I think that, we also, sometimes we have to be consistent in terms of sticking with a vision to actually get there. And we've seen that when part of Whakareki was almost sold off for a housing development, which would have been a real shame to have suddenly lost such an opportunity there. So I would encourage councillors to continue to see the value of this wonderful area.
Thanks, Councillor Sarah. Just some final comments from me. I was fortunate enough to work on the zoo plan with Councillor Angela and some others back in, I think it was 2015, where we brought some world experts out to New Zealand to help us plan the further development of the zoo and the expectations and plans that we had for it. And it showed to me that there's quite a lot of passion in the city amongst families and that philanthropic sector to participate in that. I think there's an opportunity here for council and that staff and elected members to try and enhance the community models, because they do work. When you look at the gardens and you look at the playgrounds, particularly out here where I live in Flagstaff, the community has been involved quite successfully in bringing councillors to the table for the appropriate developments when they were needed. So I think there's an opportunity around the zoo and Whakareki to leverage even more on enhancing those community models. Lance mentioned that we've got Tui 2000 and WAG, and as Sarah alluded to, they do bring volunteers, they bring access to fundraising, and they are a model that works. We've also got Friends of the Zoo, and there must be some opportunities there, as there has been with Friends of the Hamilton Gardens, to further develop what the Friends can do from a community perspective in terms of bringing funders to the table. So I'll be supporting the staff motion today, and let's hope that over the next few months and year or so, we can in fact get a community model going there that will get the zoo and Whakareki up to the speed that's needed to raise the necessary funds. So let's now go for a vote, and we'll do that by way of a show of hands. Those in favour? Against?
Carried unanimously.
Thank you. All right, so we've got to the end of the open agenda. I will move resolution to exclude the public. Do I have a seconder, please?
Second, yeah.
Those in favour? Against? Carried. Right, do you